Hey, everybody, welcome back to the SoCap Improv Comedy Podcast. My name is Ralph. I'm the owner and artistic director at the SoCap Improv Comedy Theater in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Contact is admin at socap.ca or ralph at socap.ca. This podcast is intended for people who are interested in improvising on the stage, but also people who love or are interested in what improv can teach while simultaneously having zero to no interest or zero to low interest of getting on the school. Getting on the stage. My gosh, I was anticipating what I was going to say next, which, as a quick aside, in this era of AI and its disruption that it's going to cause to every aspect of our lives, I would assume I'm hoping like one of the benefits or one of the possibilities is that schools can spend more time teaching life skills and helping kids develop life skills, which would mean more art, more, visual arts, theater, uh, things about around nutrition and health, and and then other things like cognitive biases and being aware of manipulation and things like that. I think that could be, a benefit. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe the dystopia will happen and 1% of people will live in gated communities with all the resources, and 99% of us will wander around outside the gates fighting over scraps. Who knows? It's going to be exciting, I guess, regardless. Anyway, I wonder if this has ever happened to you, because it sure has to me. You're walking down the street, by yourself with your headphones on, and some stranger grabs your attention by waving their arms frantically. They got their phone out. They've got this look on their face like they need help. And so you stop, and because they seem harmless, and they ask you a question like, "Excuse me, I'm looking for such and such a place. Can you help me?" And oh, okay, yeah, I can certainly help you find, you know, this subway or this street or whatever. And just as you're about to go, they catch you and they say, "Oh, excuse me, now that I have your attention," and they start to go on with something else. And when they do that, "Excuse me, now that I have your attention," or "Oh, another thing," or they want to continue the conversation. So the directions was just a way to get your attention. There's an emotional shift, right? Okay, you get a little on edge, a little uneasy, not really sure what this person wants, what their game is, and you get on edge. Like, is it gonna be, do they want money, sex? What do they want? But we get a little like, okay, this is now weird, and I'm on edge, and I'm not enjoying this moment. Anyway, that moment that happens, when people seem to want one thing but then shift and you're like, okay, I don't know what's going on. That happens in improv too. And we can create it, in other people. Like if we try to do these techniques, to get somebody's attention by saying something, and then okay, now here's the real reason, right? You're gonna get people on edge and in this state of doubt. Okay, so that's when it happens in the real life, in the real world, and I'm assuming that almost everybody has experienced that. I have experienced it on numerous occasions. Um, Still every once in a while it happens to me, but that's doubt. And in improv or in a situation where it's you and another person in the real world, when there's doubt, when the improviser themselves know what's going on or have a pretty clear idea, but their scene partner doesn't know and the audience doesn't know, and in the real world the person you're talking to doesn't quite know what your game is, what you're after. um and in these situations, I watch audiences and they do this. They react the same way as does the scene partner who doesn't know what's going on. They kind of hold their breath. They're waiting for clarity, and they will give you a certain amount of time. And what that time is, I can't say exactly, but it's somewhere, I don't know, 5 to 30 seconds, maybe it's somewhere in there, but it's different in different situations. Because this doubt creates tension. and there's tension, and and because that engages our slow thinking process, our attention, there's only a certain amount of time we can sustain that before it eventually goes away. It's like trying to meditate and to clear your mind of conscious thought. You can do that for a few seconds, but within 5 to 20 seconds, your head is once again filled with thoughts. And people want to know watching, they want to know what's happening, what is the game? And I don't mean game of the scene in the UCB sense. I mean like what am I watching? So I'll give you an example here that happened in a class last week where this couple was in the back seat of an Uber, and the female of the couple said to her husband, "Well, our marriage is over. You've been cheating." And the husband went, "What? No, no, I haven't." So I let that go on. And in this situation, what usually happens is the wife then has to present more evidence of how she knows the husband's cheating, which they, deny through plausibility, plausible denials, right? Like, well, you've been coming home late. Oh, well, that's because at work we're doing this extra thing, and I've had to, and I'm sorry about that, but that's all done now. Oh, but also, there's people calling you on the phone, and when I answer, there's no one there. Oh, well, that's my so and so play a trick. Anyway, they keep having plausible deniability, and it's just spinning the wheels because we don't know what's going on. So I let it play out for about 30 seconds, and the audience was doing that very thing. They were waiting patiently, and they're starting to tune out. So I stopped it. And I asked the actor playing the husband, I said, "So, are you cheating?" And he goes, "Oh, yeah." And I'm like, "Well, your denials sound, they're too good in the sense of like, no one, no, only you know that. I suspect, in fact, I'm pretty sure you were cheating, but I don't know who else is." And so I polled the class, and they were all like me. They're like, "I think he is, but I don't know." There was doubt, and that doubt um, made enough of tension that people weren't laughing. And then I asked the scene partner, "Do you know?" And she was like, "I have no idea. I really don't know." And so it was a good feedback for this improviser to understand that he thought he was being pretty obvious in his denials. Like, no, your denials were quite good, to the fact that most of us watching from the outside were reasonably sure, but not sure enough to participate. And that's the thing. We couldn't participate in the scene because we're waiting for ironclad, irrefutable proof that he's cheating, which would come in the form of an admission. "Yes, you're right, sweetheart, I've been cheating." And then we will laugh. Then we will laugh because, oh, we know what's going on. I can participate. So that the tension is broken. Ah, I'm in now. Or a denial that's so obviously fake that we can play along. So, with the audience being unsure, the scene partner's unsure, there's just tension, there's no laughs, there's no participation, and it feels very dead. And that's going to continue until they can't stand it. And then he'll eventually admit to it, but by then the scene's over. So when your audience doesn't know what's happening, when they don't know the truth, they can't play along. And that's the same if you're in front of an audience, you have another scene partner, or in the real world, if you are being cagey about your true intent and your intention, people will tend to read that as doubt, and and they'll hold off because it's protective, right? So, I said, "Okay, sir, do this scene again. We'll pick up from this point where she accuses you of cheating, and now be more obvious, like really roll your eyes, and as Shakespeare would say, protest too much." So even though everybody in the audience knew what was going to happen, all the people in the class knew it was coming, she said, "Oh, well, our marriage is over, so you've been cheating." He was like, "Oh, what? Me cheating? How could you say such a thing?" And then everybody laughed. And they laughed because it was so obvious that he was cheating. And then right away, his scene partner just lit up and went, just played it perfectly. because after he had said an exaggerated denial, and she understood the dynamic, the stakes started to raise very naturally and everyone had more fun. For example, within a couple of lines, it was like, well, what about this lipstick on your collar? And he went like, oh, this? Oh, I can explain this. And the audience was like laughing with glee, anticipating what kind of excuse he was going to come up with. But it was much more enjoyable. You know, there's this thing that people, in my experience, have where they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna get to that. Like, I'll explain that later. But right now, I want to play this part." And it's like, that is. I'm not gonna say it doesn't work. It is extremely difficult, or much more difficult than just inviting people in, not to be dramatic and not to try to wow people, but to spread joy. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to spread joy, and we can't spread joy if the audience doesn't know what's going on. So the audiences want clarity, just like receivers of information want clarity so they can relax and enjoy and participate. In scenes, I often tell and say, because it's true, that the first big laugh you will get in a scene comes when the audience understands the situation. Oh my gosh, I get it now. She's excited about their anniversary, but he's about to say, I'm leaving you. Once the game is clear to everybody, scene partners are much more free to make strong choices, to play into it. Uh, and audiences can participate and enjoy, and scenes become much more playful and less about confusing and cunning and all that stuff. It's, not to say that cunning is not a part of improv. It is, but you can be more cunning when you know what's going on. So in improv, I want to. This is because doubt can be used. I'm not saying never have doubt. So I'm never I never say never, which is not true. I rarely say it, and I try. So I'm saying in this situation, doubt can be very difficult, and I also want to change, or I want to be clear about doubt versus uncertainty, because at the beginning of the scene, there's tons of uncertainty. We have uncertainty. The audience has uncertainty. When you meet somebody in public, in the real world, there's some uncertainty. Who is this person? What do they want? Will this person become someone I just talked to for 2 minutes? Will I hate them? Will I fall madly in love with them? If you think about the people who are not in your family, who are in your life, at some point you had a first encounter. And before that encounter, or as that encounter started, you may have had, or probably did have, a lot of uncertainty about where this was going, but staying open. So uncertainty at the beginning, I'm a big fan of, because discovery is part of the process, and I've covered that in other podcasts. And uncertainty, like doubt, can only be stayed in for a certain amount of time before the audience is, their focus is engaged. And there's a time where that starts to wane, because it takes too much energy. So to remove doubt, if your character is lying, make it clear, make it fun, be playful, spread joy. What, me? Me? Cheating? Frankly, I'm insulted that you would think that. And then everybody knows what's going on and they'll play along. Be obvious, be relatable. You get way more, and you'll get way further, and your scene will get way further. Remember, with improv, with me, it's like, look at us. Now look at me. Look at us. Look at what we're doing together. All right. So my closing thoughts are: be very careful of doubt. There's places to use it, absolutely, but it's nuanced and it's more difficult. Please send me your questions or feedback at ralph@socap.ca, SOCAP as in Peter.ca. Thanks so much. And hey, you all have a wonderful week. We'll see you next time. Bye.